to you. Thank you for being here, everybody, today for our leadership hour. The topic of today's lecture will be the emotionally intelligent leader, something we can all learn about, grow from, and enjoy. And our speaker, as always, is Dr. Gene Crumley from UC Davis, and he works a bit with our campus too. And he's an expert on leadership, has done leadership academies with a department chair, consults heavily on the topic of leadership, both very specifically and broadly. And he's always a lot of fun to work with, always has very positive, uplifting messages for anybody in the UC system who seeks his consultation with leadership or elsewhere, and then our campus as well. And Gene, once again, we're really grateful that you're here with us today. And people who are joining us still, thank you very much for being here. And take it away, Gene. Thank you.
Thank you, Teeny. And just for the record, you'll notice that the seal on this cover page is not UC Davis, it's UC Merced, because I'm also part of Teeny's office at Merced, and I'm very proud to be so. All right, so I want to begin with a question. I want you to imagine two leaders, and we're going to make them very, very similar. So basically, any way you can think about how to compare two people, we're going to make them identical. Age, gender, education, personality, intelligence, ambition, on and on and on. So that's the thought experiment I'd like you to have right now. We've got two essentially identical people. Now, one of them is markedly more successful than the other. Now, I want you to imagine further that we're going to rule out bad luck. So we're not going to say, well, sure, they're not as successful as the other person because, gosh, look at all of the bad luck that they've had happen in their time. So we're going to rule that out. They both have the same luck. And for this thought experiment, we're even going to make the less successful one more intelligent. All right, so you're with me now? We've got two leaders. One of them is more successful than the other. And the one who's less successful, we've ruled out it isn't because of bad luck. And we've added further that they're actually even more intelligent, kind of standard IQ measures than the other more successful one. So if we rule out bad luck and we rule out intelligence, what accounts for the difference in their respective success? Well, in 1990, Peter Salovey at Yale and John Meyer at University of New Hampshire took on exactly that kind of thought experiment. And they wanted to answer it in a systematic and rigorous way. And in 1990, they published a paper called, simply enough, Emotional Intelligence. So what did Salovey and Meyer mean by emotional intelligence? Well, before going further, a disclaimer. I'm going to present a model of emotional intelligence. And as soon as that word model is out of my mouth, I'm reminded of this saying from George Edward Pelham Box, George E.P. Box. George Box was a British statistician, and pretty quickly after the coronavirus pandemic back in March of 2020, when the whole world kind of realized what was going on, very quickly, Chris Murray at the University of Washington, Robert Wachter at UC San Francisco, Anthony Fauci at CDC, and many others were quoting Box. They're saying, all models are wrong, so any models we're seeing are wrong, but some are useful. And what Box meant by that idea is that no model is going to actually replicate reality. So this model I'm going to present to you of emotional intelligence, it's not reality, but I have found, and others have found it useful when this idea of emotional intelligence is presented this way. So I refer to this as the 4 domains or 4 skills model of emotional intelligence: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and social management. So now let me define these terms. So it all begins in that upper left quadrant of self-awareness. So I'm gonna define self-awareness in two ways. It's noticing and labeling. So let me further define that. Now, when I talk about self-awareness as noticing, noticing is going to mean being aware of my emotional state in the moment, kind of moment by its effect on my body. So we've all probably used the phrase, man, I've got butterflies in my stomach, or man, I got cotton mouth, or all these kinds of phrasing is this idea of noticing, and then as we go on, labeling what's going on in our bodies. So self-awareness is going to be noticing what's my emotional state moment by moment, and then labeling what are the words I use to describe my emotional state in the moment and its effect on my body. But there's a paradox when it comes to labeling, because while emotions are universal to human beings, labels are specific. In other words, two people could have the same emotion, but label it differently. Now, they wouldn't necessarily label it dramatically differently, but they would label it somewhat differently. And as we're going to see as I go along, labels really matter when we're talking about emotional intelligence. So starting in infancy, very, very young, my wife and I had a new, I guess, 4 weeks old yesterday, 2 days ago, new granddaughter, and already I'm kind of queuing up my attention, watching our daughter interact with her, seeing when I'm going to try and be more conscious than I was with the two grandsons. When do daughters start using this language? Because this is very, very typical. As we're infants, our caregiver, mom, dad, someone, some other loved one, extended family, so forth, they start telling us how we're feeling. And this is before we've gained language, of course, because we're still infancy. But it's often in this phrasing, you're feeling, and then fill in the blank. And of course, that continues through our childhood, sometimes formally in school. I know that the school that the primary grade school that our two oldest grandchildren, one in Massachusetts, one in Oregon here, I know that they're learning even in first grade some emotional language. You know, teachers, not just parents, are giving them labels to attach to their emotions. Now, as we're learning these words, we're also learning etiquettes, plural. So, and this is a subtle part, but it's really, really important to grasp this concept as we're thinking about emotional intelligence. So as we're learning these words, you're feeling hungry, you're feeling tired, you're feeling angry, you're feeling jealous, you're feeling upset, so on and so forth. We're also learning an etiquette. Now, etiquette is not going to refer to which fork to use at a formal dining table. I'm going to define it this way: an unwritten code of behavior expected in a certain setting according to a norm within a group or society. All three parts of that definition are important. So I want to be very explicit about each of them. So the first part of that definition is it's unwritten. It's an unwritten code of behavior. In other words, there are no books that everyone reads about etiquette that is, universal. Everyone reads the same books. There's no books that we're all reading. Now, are there books about etiquette? Sure, of course, but none that everyone reads. And that's not what I'm talking about in terms of this etiquette idea. It's an unwritten code of behavior. And then the next part is that it's expected in a certain setting. In other words, etiquettes are not universal. It's not as though there's one etiquette and you apply it in every setting. So it's going to be this unwritten code of behavior expected in a certain setting, so non-universal. And then the last part is really the most critical part: according to a norm within a group or society. So it's not universal, but it is specific. These etiquettes Not, it's not as though everybody has the same etiquettes, but those etiquettes that all of us have are specific to it's a norm within a group or society. A group could be, of course, as small as a family unit and could be as large as, in fact, a nation in terms of society. All right, so when we're learning these words, we're also learning etiquettes. And again, back to this idea of learning these words, this is happening principally below the conscious level. Sometimes when we're growing up, our parents will explicitly say, don't do this or do that. But most of the time as children, we're just picking these things up below the conscious level. So when we're being told you feel this way, also learning as a consequence, behave like this. So this is where it's going to get ridiculously complex. So just hang with me. So just as we didn't all learn the same emotional words from the same emotional dictionary, we didn't all learn the same etiquettes because we don't all belong to the same groups or societies, and therefore we do not all share the same norms. Again, these etiquettes are specific to groups and settings, and that's we don't all share the same ones. So if I can get my slide to advance here. So let me give you an example. Now, in this example, we're going to imagine we're in a classroom together and not on Zoom. So when listening to a presentation, if you have a question or want to make a comment, some of us learned an etiquette of raising our hands and waiting to be called upon. And some of us learned an etiquette of just speaking up, just raising that question or posing that thought, not having to raise our hands or be called upon. But here's another etiquette example, standing in a line. Now, every one of us learned an etiquette of standing in a line. We just not to stand too close or too far apart. We just didn't all learn the same distance of how close is too close and how far apart is too far apart. Again, my apologies why my slides kind of get wonky every now and then. All right, let me try this. So, but here's the thing about etiquettes, that our way of doing things feels like the right way to do things. And a different way of doing things feels like, and I'm using that word feels because they really are these emotional sensations. When we're behaving the way we know we're supposed to be behaving, we feel one way. And when we're behaving or other people are behaving, we don't think are the right way to behave, it feels like the wrong way. So if our etiquette is just speak up when you have a thought or a question, then someone raising their hand looks silly or foolish or juvenile. Well, come on, we're not in kindergarten anymore. On the other hand, if our etiquette is to raise our hands and wait to be called upon before we ask a question or speak, then someone who just starts speaking out, rude, or what is wrong with you? Why weren't you raised better than that? So this is the thing about etiquettes, is when people behave the way we behave, their etiquette feels like the right one. And when people behave in ways that are not the way we behave, those feel like the wrong etiquettes. So that's the first component of this model. The second component, actually, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause here for just a second and give each of you a chance to either unmute and speak out with your thoughts or questions, or you can use the chat, or you can even use the little emoji of the raised hand. So thoughts or questions about anything I've said so far? and maybe I will ask for at least this feedback from one or more of you. Did that kind of hang together? That makes some sense, or was it just so confusing that you wouldn't even know where to start to ask a question or make a comment? That's my invitation to all of you. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Christian. All right. All right. Well, I'm going to let Christian speak for all of you unless you indicate otherwise. All right. So that's the first domain, self-awareness, in this 4-domain model of emotional intelligence. The second one is self-management. I think self-management is best understood as boosting those activities. And by activities, I'm going to mean both our thoughts and our behaviors that are adaptive or conducive to goal attainment. So self-management is going to be thought of this way: is it's doing those things that move us towards achieving our goals, and this is the other part. So we got a gas pedal and a brake pedal, and stopping or slowing down activities, thoughts and behaviors again, that are maladaptive to goal attainment. So both components, pressing the gas on doing things that are adaptive to goal attainment, and stepping on the brake to stop things that are not conducive to goal attainment. Those are both components of self-management. And achieving higher levels of emotional intelligence is going to mean both stepping on the gas, things that really move us forward, and hitting the brakes on things that might get in the way of our goal attainment. So now we've identified half of emotional intelligence. And again, we'll kind of visualize it this way. So self-awareness is going to be noticing my emotional state moment by moment, and then labeling it. And again, those labels carry with them a etiquette. And again, this is mostly occurring below the conscious level. And then self-management is going to be about the idea of those emotional states that move us forward towards goal attainment. We're going to press on the gas with those. And any of the behaviors that kind of impede or get in the way of our goal attainment, we're going to tap or step on the brakes, slam on the brakes sometimes, if they're getting in the way of goal attainment. All right. So once again, before I go on, chance to thoughts, questions about either self-awareness or self-management. All right, so I'm going to assume, good, thank you. Yeah, so Emily brings up a really important point. And actually, Emily, I would say yes and no. Yes, some goals we are aware of at a conscious and deliberate level. On the other hand, other goals aren't necessarily at the conscious and deliberate level because, again, these etiquettes are occurring below the conscious level. So let me give you an example. So if we are aware that we want to come across to a group of people as thoughtful and deliberate in our thinking, then we might consciously and deliberately try and voice our thoughts or opinions in a meeting or in a gathering. And it could be a social gathering, it could be an informal gathering, wouldn't have to be a formal gathering. And we might also, below the conscious level, be scanning our audience and getting information, again, below the conscious level, that strategy is either working or not working. And if below the conscious level, we think that strategy is working, that we're attaining our goal of being perceived as thoughtful and intelligent, deliberate in our, we might continue to speak. On the other hand, if we get any kind of signals, maybe that's not working, then we may throttle back, may tap on the brakes, and not say everything that occurs to us. When I say that, I think about this wonderful saying that my wife's grandfather passed on to his kids and grandkids, which does go to your point, Emily, of being very conscious of it. But his sage advice was intended to make sure his children and grandchildren really thought carefully about that at the conscious level. So he had this saying that he taught them: always speak the truth, just don't always speak. And what he was trying to signal to them is, you want to be perceived as a truth teller, because that's important socially and morally. He was a Presbyterian minister, but it's also not necessary to say absolutely everything that comes to mind, because, and again, here I'm reminded of that wonderful saying by Mark Twain: better to be thought a fool than to open one's mouth and remove all doubt. So I'm going to agree with you, Emily. Yes, we want to be aware of our goals, but sometimes I'm going to suggest there are goals that we're not even conscious of, that we still may be trying to attain. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, please chat some more or push back otherwise. So that's the first half of emotional intelligence. And the other half, it goes to the third domain, which I'm labeling social awareness. Social awareness sounds very similar to self-awareness because it's kind of the mirror opposite. So once again, it's about noticing and labeling. This time, however, it's about noticing two things, both my emotional state and the effect that others are having on my emotional state and the effect I'm having on them. And this is where, to your point, Emily, I think a lot of this social awareness can occur, does occur, maybe not a lot. Some of this social awareness occurs below the conscious level. So again, back to that illustration, we're talking in a group, and sometimes when a thought occurs to us, we immediately, without any kind of filtering at all, we just share it. But then based upon the effect, the response I get from others, their facial expressions, what if there's changes in their, what we would call body language. Researchers refer to it as posture and gesture. Posture is the body at rest, and gesture is the body in movement. So based upon people's body language, facial expressions, it's going to give us some information. So here's where noticing has these two components. In social awareness, I'm aware, or the more aware I am, the more emotionally intelligent I am, of the effect others are having on me and the effect I'm having on them. And then labeling, again, back to this idea of putting words to these emotional states. Here, emotional intelligence goes up to the degree that I'm accurate and precise in the words I'm using to describe and understand my own and others' emotional state. Now remember, we didn't all learn the same words or even the same number of words. So here I like to think about these labels or words. The metaphor I like to use here is crayons. So the metaphor would run like this. So some of us have a smaller box of crayons and some of us have a larger box of crayons, meaning some of us learned a few labels and words to describe our emotions, and others of us learned lots of labels and words to describe and understand our emotional state. So let me give you an example. So some of us, excuse me, some of us learned a single word to label and describe the emotion of anger. So the emotion is anger, and that's the only word that we learn in that smaller box of crayons. So I'm feeling angry, or they're feeling angry. Excuse me. I'm waiting for my slide to advance. All right. And some of us learned several words to label and describe the emotion of anger. So angry, furious, upset, irritated. And we got to remember that when we're learning all those different, subtly different words to describe that primary emotion of anger, we're also learning etiquettes. We're learning how to behave when we're irritated, how to behave when we're upset, how to behave when we're furious, how to behave when we're angry. So how can this play out in terms of emotional intelligence? Well, let's return to that standing in line example. So each person is going to have a larger or smaller vocabulary using our two imaginary leaders. So that the more emotionally intelligent leader is going to have a larger vocabulary, the less emotionally intelligent leader is going to have a smaller vocabulary. As soon as I use that word intelligent, though, I want to remind you that that less emotionally intelligent person, we've nonetheless in our thought experiment have identified them as having greater general intelligence, what we commonly refer to as IQ. So that's an important distinction here. IQ and EQ, if you will, are not the same thing. There's a relationship, but it begins to break down once you are in what might be thought as the broad range of broad general intelligence measured on IQ test, low end 85, high end 115. So that 30-point range on general IQ test is what is thought of as kind of the broad middle. So again, we're going to give the more intelligent person actually less emotional intelligence. And we're doing it by way of this illustration of vocabulary. So the person that's got the larger repertoire of words also has a larger repertoire of etiquettes. And conversely, the person with a smaller range of words is going to have a smaller range of etiquette repertoire. So neither of these people like being stood too close, having someone stand too close to them, or standing too far apart in a line. So they both have that same emotion. But the person that's got the higher emotional intelligence, remember they got the larger range of words, they are going to identify that emotion as being irritated. When someone is standing too close to them or someone is standing too far apart, they're going to label, and now I am going to come back to Emily and say, at a conscious level, this is at a conscious level, I'm irritated. Now, their etiquette, when they're irritated, is they're going to focus on their breathing, they're going to think about something pleasant, they're going to kind of remove themselves from the situation. When I'm irritated, I'm going to keep my thoughts to myself. I'm not going to say anything. On the other hand, the person with the lower emotional intelligence, again, just one red crayon, their etiquette when angry is to say something. Hey, keep it moving, or hey, buddy, you're a little too close here. Back off. So two very different etiquettes. The etiquette of irritation, I don't like this, I'm going to think about something else. The etiquette of anger, I'm going to say something in this situation. And again, etiquettes are funny things. We're not aware of them as long as everyone has the same one. So if everybody standing in line has the same etiquette for how close is too close and how far is too far, then no one's aware of their etiquette. On the other hand, when someone doesn't have the same etiquette, it can feel like the other etiquette is wrong. So back to this idea of noticing in self-awareness. When we are noticing the effect we're having on others and the effect they're having on us, we're also making judgments about typically their behavior, because very rarely do we think that we're behaving inappropriately. But we do make judgments about other people's behavior. Not if they share the same etiquettes with us, because they're behaving the way we would behave. But when people start behaving in ways that aren't the way we behave, now we start noticing, and even if it's not at a conscious level, below the conscious level, we're making judgments about their etiquettes. And when etiquettes don't match, even if they're close, it's going to be uncomfortable for everyone. And that's why the fourth domain becomes so important in emotional intelligence. So the fourth domain is social management. So now we see the mirror opposite. We had self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, social management. So I think one of the best ways to think about social management is it's the ability to take information. And again, this is going to be mostly at the conscious level. We're going to take information from those three domains. We're going to try and drive it to the conscious level. And we're going to use it, for example, to diffuse or manage conflict. That's a key indicator of higher emotional intelligence, as people tend to either be able to diffuse or not even get into conflicts. They're able to successfully negotiate those situations. So that's one marker of social management, or one skill, if you will. The other is to create environments where people cooperate at high levels, what we would think of as teamwork, getting people to see different points of view, getting people to respect other opinions, to see things in other ways. And then finally, kind of the third large component of social management is the ability to sustain focused effort on problem solving or creativity. So leaders with high levels of emotional intelligence, particularly in this fourth domain, social management, they can manage conflict more effectively. They can create environment where people cooperate with each other, especially when they don't necessarily agree upon things. And then finally, they're able, with this higher level of emotional intelligence, to keep groups of people focused in their efforts on joint problem solving or joint creativity. So now I want to return to our two leaders. Remember, we've decided they both have the same luck, good and bad, and we're going to make the less successful one actually smarter. So now the question is, could emotional intelligence explain their respective levels of success? So now I want us to do another thought experiment. This time we're going to imagine that they both encounter the same challenge. Now the one with higher emotional intelligence notes what is going on in their body. So they're noticing, and so does the other person. They're also noticing how they feel about the situation. And they're each of them labeling that emotion. But remember, they don't each have the same labels. And back to the metaphor of the crayon, the person with the higher emotional intelligence has got more crayons in their box. It's got a wider range of labels to use and therefore etiquettes to follow. So in this case, with this challenge, the leader with the higher EQ is going to label that feeling in their body as frustration. On the other hand, the leader with lower emotional intelligence is going to label that feeling in their body as anger. They're upset with the situation. The other one is frustrated by the situation. Now, again, back to this idea, we're learning words, we're learning etiquettes. So the leader with the higher emotional intelligence, their etiquette is when I'm feeling frustrated, I'm going to stop and take a deep breath. I'm going to compose myself. I'm not going to react to the situation. I'm going to respond to the situation. And to be able to respond, we're going to need time. We don't need any time when we react to situations, because that's pure emotion. There's no cognition involved. But to be able to respond to a challenge, be able to respond to a situation, we need to be able to have a little bit of time to be able to think, not just react emotionally. So again, person is labeling, I'm frustrated. My etiquette is when I'm frustrated, I'm going to stop and take a deep breath and kind of think about things. On the other hand, the person whose etiquette is I'm angry, their reaction to situations that make them angry is I'm going to lash out. I'm going to let people know I don't like this situation. Change your behavior. So that's their etiquette. Now, when we're thinking about this particular thought experiment, I want to introduce a psychological term referred to as perseveration. Perseveration is simply this idea of returning to the same idea, belief, or thought pattern over and over and over again. Hence, we perseverate. And I'm assuming it's probably clear to all of you, but I'm going to state it nonetheless. Perseveration is almost always maladaptive. So with that idea of perseveration in mind, let's go back to our two leaders that are facing that challenge. So which of the two of them do we think might be more likely to perseverate on the situation? The one who sees it as a frustration, or the one who perceives it as causing them to be angry? Which of the two leaders is more likely to stop engaging in non-productive or non-goal-oriented thoughts or behaviors? And which is more likely to shift their attention to a different thought or activity in order to stay focused and engaged in achieving their goals? So let me pause here for just a moment and tell you a very quick story that kind of illustrates this idea. So last week, my wife and I were out for a walk in one of our less used parks near where we live here in Oregon. And we had walked up this trail. There were no cars in the parking lot because we had parked a ways back and taken another path to get to this second path. We start coming back down the hill, and we see these two people, man and a woman, and a dog, happened to be a pit bull, start racing at us. Now, my wife just 3 months ago had hip replacement surgery, so I'm very conscious about her balance and things like that. So I start calling to the dog, stop, go back. I'm not aware that the owner is saying anything because I'm so focused on trying to stop this dog and kind of make sure it doesn't get close to my wife. I then become aware that the owner has finally gained some voice control over the dog, brought it back, leash up, and then he starts yelling at me. Didn't you hear what I was yelling at you? I said, if you called the dog's name. I, of course, didn't. And I said, I didn't hear you. And then that got him really starts yelling at me, starts this, kind of, this is a guy probably 30 years younger than me and bigger. And he starts this kind of menacing behavior. And I say to my wife, we're just going to walk. We're just going to continue walking. Don't engage. Don't look. And so as we're walking along, finally get out of that really charged position, she's saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. And I agree. And then she understandably wants to continue kind of talking about what happened. And I said to her, you know what, I don't want to talk about it anymore. I know how memory works, and the more we talk about it, the more this experience is going to get burned into my memory, and I don't want to burn it in. So I shifted our attention to talk about something different. So there's a quick little illustration of what I'm talking about here, is being able to have the challenge to tap on the brakes, to not respond in a way that would be, in the situation I just told, unhelpful, to say, control your dog, jerk. I just wanted to get out of the situation, because I could tell the longer I was present, the more out of control he was becoming. And then to shift our attention to something else. So the big question is, can we learn to be more emotionally intelligent? And the answer is yes. But the question is how? So it's going to go back to self-awareness. All emotional intelligence starts with that domain in this four domain model of emotional intelligence: self-awareness, noticing and labeling. And here the goal is going to be to increase our vocabulary so we can more finely calibrate our emotions, and as a consequence of that, have it afford us a greater range of etiquettes we can use. Again, let me tell a quick story to kind of illustrate this idea of, can we learn to become more emotional intelligent? Oh, I'm guessing this is probably 7 years ago now, 5, 6, 7 years ago. The dean of our school of veterinary medicine asked me to kind of facilitate some real high level conflict between two of our services. Service in the veterinary school just means a group of veterinarians providing, much like physicians do, different kinds of services to their patients. And these two leaders in this highly conflicted situation, part of the conflict is they were both serving the same types of patients. Now, in veterinary medicine, the patient refers to the animal, and the client refers to the person who's responsible for paying for the services rendered to the patients. And again, part of this conflict was this historical relationship between these two services being so close in terms of who they served, in terms of patients and clients. And that was a lot of the conflict. But as I began to meet with these two leaders, I realized that while they were both just super intelligent, you don't get to be a veterinarian and then teach at UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine without being pretty darn smart. But while they were intellectually both much smarter than me, they both, I quickly realized when we were talking, had very limited vocabularies to talk about what was going on. So part of my work with them over time was to build up their emotional vocabulary, because I knew as I did that, I would help them also develop a range of etiquettes that would allow them to deal with conflict in a little more nuanced ways, rather than this high energy, high impact, and high destructiveness that was going on. Now, this is not a Disney movie, so it doesn't have an absolutely happy ending. But part of the problem was one of the veterinarians really did take this on. I remember came to subsequent meetings and literally had this laminated chart with all these emotional words and definitions for them, and would refer to it in the conversation. And the other veterinarian, I could tell, really didn't buy into this idea that their etiquettes were really the issue so much as it was just, bad intentions, counterparts, activity. Anyway, the bloodletting abated somewhat, but ultimately, because both of them didn't engage in it, it didn't get as good an outcome as it. But the one who did continue to build their vocabulary, their words, and therefore etiquettes, I'm happy to report, is still teaching at UC Davis, and the other one ended up leaving under a cloud because it was causing a lot of problems in their service. Anyway, so it can be learned. That's the takeaway. And so here I'm going to say, but to do so, we got to slow down long enough to think. So this little acronym, the T in think is, I want to ask myself, am I tired? Because the research in this area is just robust and consistent. Not getting enough sleep has a profound effect upon our mood. So that's the first question we want to ask if we want to become more emotionally intelligent is, am I tired? Do I need some sleep? Am I hungry? The H in think. Because being hungry, like being tired, also has a significant effect on our mood. And in fact, there's this made-up word, hangry, and it refers to being hungry and irritable. But that is the real question. Am I irritable? Am I feeling just out of sorts, and are people making me feel even more out of sorts? And am I making others feel out of sorts? Because if I'm irritable, it's often a signal that I'm both tired and hungry. And then finally, the next is the N in think. Do I need a break? I think a really good rule of thumb is, when I'm feeling irritable, when I'm tired, I'm hungry, I need to take a break. Maybe take a quick little nap, maybe get something to eat, go for a brief walk, just something to get out of the environment that's making me irritable. And then finally, the K in this model, this little acronym is, we just got to keep at this until this becomes a habit, that I'm conscious. Am I tired? Am I hungry? Am I irritable? If so, then my prescription, my etiquette is, I'm going to take a break. All right, so we have about 10 minutes left. So what I'd like to do is leave these last 10 minutes open to all of you for thoughts or questions about anything I've said up until now. So please unmute or use the chat feature or the little hand emoji. And Christian, I'll ask you, if the little hand emoji goes up, would you please call my attention to that? So thoughts or questions from anyone? All right, so I'm going to assume that means, oh, good. Christian.
Yeah, so one thing that you said I thought was actually a good modeling of this practice, where you said, this isn't a Disney movie, there aren't perfect happy endings, but then you used a more specific emotional word of, there was a lesson learned, there were different outcomes, the two people who took up your advice in different ways saw different results based on that. So I thought that was great, and a good reminder that emotional intelligence serves a purpose for positive emotions, not just negative emotions.
Yeah, great insight, Christian, great insight. Because again, remember, I've got the gas pedal and the brake pedal. So what the gas pedal does is it keeps us focused on those emotional states that are helping us get towards goal attainment. So back to that idea of, even if I have a challenge, I don't perseverate. I don't stay stuck in that challenge, what I can't do. Instead, I shift to, okay, what can I do to get back on pace, or to get back in the game, so to speak. And Emily raises a really good question. So what techniques are breaking the habit of perseveration and rumination? So the best one is, well, I'll tell you two. The easiest one, and it often is successful, is the moment I become aware I'm thinking about the same thing over and over again, now I got to do something different. However, I'm going to also encourage all of you to try something that when I used to be able to teach in a classroom, when I would teach this strategy, I would reference that, and I can't think of his name now, a researcher at UCLA Medical School. He had been, he'd done his, some of his training with Aaron Beck, the psychiatrist at Penn. And Aaron Beck was the psychiatrist that developed cognitive behavioral therapy. And what this student of Beck's, who went on to become a researcher at UCLA Medical School, did with his patients, and I thought it was very clever. When I read this study, I started using it, incorporating it into my classes, is he would have his patients just put a rubber band around their wrist, and every time they would have one of these perseverating moments, and his patients were people with obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, is he just have them snap the rubber band, just kind of break the perseveration, and then they would ask themselves, why do I think this is true, in terms of what they were perseverating around, including things like, did I turn off the gas? Did I turn out the light? Did I lock the door? Things like that. But the way I used it in my courses is I'd have people think about, okay, when I am caught up in this negative thinking and, oh, I can't get this done or whatever, I would have them ahead of time kind of think through, okay, when those situations occur, what I'm going to do is, fill in the blank. And then the little rubber band snap would be the cue for that routine, because Larry Squires at UC San Diego was the first researcher that I'm aware of to really get deep insight into habits of mind, habits of behavior. And what Squires identified was this pattern that all habits have, where there's a cueing event, and then there's a routine, and then there's a payoff, a reward. And so what Squires did was try and interrupt the routine, because the cueing event in habits is very hard to control. So what I would encourage the faculty that were in my class, and these again are physicians, is I'd say, okay, when you are in that situation, you figure out whatever that situation is, snap the rubber band. That's going to be the cueing event to, okay, now what am I going to do in this situation? And then the reward is going to be that you got out of the situation elegantly, or you resolved it elegantly, things like that. So sometimes some of the physicians told me sometimes the little rubber band snap would be just a reminder, take a breath, just take a breath, think about things. Some of them told me the little rubber band snap would be the cueing event to look at their phone or their pager if they still wore them, and say, oh gosh, I gotta go, so they could elegantly get out of the situation. Some of them told me that theirs was around staying focused on their writing, and principally in their research. And when they realized their mind was wandering or they were not focused, they snapped the little rubber band, and that would remind them, okay, get up and walk for 5 minutes. Just clear my head so I can come back and sit in front of that computer screen and continue writing. So everybody had different strategies. So Emily, those are the two I would offer up. I really, really like the little rubber band strategy. I think it's a great one. I've used it myself. I've had nothing but positive feedback from faculty at Davis who've used it, that it really helps. So other thoughts or questions here, maybe the last minute or so that we've got? All right, so I'm gonna then say thank you. And if you have, if you have thoughts or questions that occur to you after we sign off now, please don't hesitate to send me an email. Now, if you send it to my Merced address, I will eventually read it. I'm not in a habit. I have just not, and maybe I need to use my rubber band strategy. But I just don't get a lot of email in my Merced address. So you could send it there, or you could also send it to my Davis address. Now, I go by Gene, but my legal name is actually Charles Eugene Crumley. So at Merced, I just go by the C in Charles with Crumley. So C Crumley at ucmerced.edu. And but if you're going to send it to my Davis address, which I do check more frequently, then you would send it to CE Crumley at ucdavis.edu. Anyway, thank you everyone for spending the time today. I really appreciate it. And again, I'll be very happy subsequently if you have thoughts or questions about anything I said today, just send me an email and we will continue the conversation. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day. Take care. Bye now.